In chapter 11, the promise of the Messiah is that there's a root and a branch going to come out of David. He's going to rule over the Gentiles. And you have it in other prophets too, like Hosea 3 and Jeremiah 23. The prophets enlarged upon, developed this promise. The psalmists did too. Psalm 89 and Psalm 132 are just two of the most famous. Let me quote to you Psalm 132 verse 11. The Lord hath sworn in truth unto David, he will not turn from it. Of the fruit of thy body will I set upon thy throne. Your physical descendants will be upon your throne. And ultimately the throne of David is the throne of God's right hand in heaven. This story involving Joash, and at the very start of his life, is the point in all of biblical history when Satan came closest to ending the line of David. Through false ecumenism and through that wicked wretch Athaliah. This was the point. Some of you might know that a critical stage was reached in the days of Hezekiah. Hezekiah was told he was going to die. And Hezekiah mourned because he knew he hadn't produced a male heir. And God gave him a few more years and then he had a son. But that wasn't this, because there would have been other lines perhaps that could have continued, and this one wasn't this. This one's more crucial, more critical. And this is one of the great instances whereby the devil, according to Revelation chapter 12, sought to destroy the man-child. You remember the image? We had sermons on that a few years ago too. The woman, which is the church, seeking to bring forth the man-child who's to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And the great red dragons there seeking to devour the child. So he wouldn't come forth. So that there'd be no Christ, and no cross, and no forgiveness of sins. And then God's promise, and God's covenant, and God's salvation, and the kingdom of grace would fail. And we would all perish. And then Satan would not be cast into hell, but he would rule, because there could be no just way for God to establish a righteous kingdom. The lessons of this gory, somewhat complicated and historical scene regarding Jehoshaphat and his false ecumenism, regarding murderous Athaliah, and regarding Satan's attempt to stop the coming of Christ. But a Davidic Son was prepared, preserved. And that's the subject of the remainder of our text in verses 11 and 12. Two verses which deal with Joash's two hidings. And by hidings, we don't mean that he was beaten severely. We mean his being hidden. That was how he was preserved, by being hidden. Remember Athaliah, desperate to reign as queen in her own right? Well, her ambition quickly dried any tears which may have fallen from her Israelite Phoenician eyes. Probably her two closest living relatives in all the world have just died suddenly and through the same man, Jehu. Two closest living relatives dead. And both of them are kings. Her brother Jehoram, king of Israel, her son Ahaziah, king of Judah, but she's not thinking of mourning. The text doesn't even mention any grief to her part. She's thinking of murdering. Murdering her own grandchildren and murdering her next closest relatives. She's all heart. There's no milk of human kindness in her. Jehoshaphat was wrong. But God's own loving kindness and tender covenant mercy is operative. Operative from heaven and operative in the heart of Jehoshabath. First mention of her today. Jehoshabath is related to the Davidic kings and the Aaronitic priesthood. She's a daughter of Jehoram, though not with Athaliah, otherwise she'd never have turned out the way she did. And she's the wife of Jehoiada, the high priest, and she is the aunt of Joash, tied up with the kingly and the priestly lines, and the aunt of the little boy, the little baby boy, who's at most a year old. Jehoshabath understands the covenant promise of God in the house of David. She has seen the Davidic line being whittled down to just one little baby, and that through that child must come the Messiah. She loves her nephew, and she risks her life to save him. In the midst of the slaughter of all the children, somehow or other, she, as a royal princess, is able to move around the palace, grab the baby, and put him into some form of storehouse. Some say the mattresses were stored there. Some say it was something like a spare bedroom where linen was kept. But she brought him in there, hid him, and brought a nurse in there to look after the little boy, and hid him for a time in the palace. And Athaliah didn't know. She thought they'd all been killed. And then he's brought to his second hiding place, because he can't safely remain in the same palace with that murdering cow. So he is brought to the temple. And of course the temple, because Jehoshabath is married to the high priest, and the high priest works in the temple, and there are homes and houses in and around the temple. And so the child comes to live with his aunt and the high priest, and they become his adoptive parents for 6 years. And instead of being killed by Athaliah, he is trained with a thorough covenant education by a godly aunt who understood the line of David and the coming of the Messiah, and a godly high priest, the most outstanding high priest for centuries, Jehoiada. They would have told him, insofar as you could tell a child, because children sometimes can blurt things out, but they would have told him when they had sense to know that he had sense, you're going to be king one day. You have responsibilities to God, to rule according to his law. You will be king one day. God delivered you. Out of all of your brothers, you are the only one left. And you don't even have any uncles left, or any grandfathers left. They've all been killed. You're the only one left. And through you will come the Messiah. And he did come too. Amen.